Hello internet, welcome to the channel. My name's Frankie and in this video we're going to be building a very naturalistic kind of habitat for the North American beaver. When I first started this zoo build, the very first animal that I knew that I wanted to be in the zoo was the North American beaver. So I'm quite excited to be making their habitat finally, after having placed quite a few already. What we're going to be doing to begin with is just placing a bit of pathing. I'm trying to get a good layout for it. All I really want is a raised path that viewers can walk along to see into the habitat from above, and then allowing a little bit of space underneath it to allow for an underwater viewing gallery. So when you're building this raised path, we're going to need to make sure that the path supports are turned off. Otherwise there are going to be massive pillars in the way, stopping you from placing a path underneath it. After the paths are in place, we can start to move on to the terrain alterations to make sure that it's at a level that we're kind of happy with, so we can start to modify it in terms of what it looks like. Now, what I need to do is to create an area at the front that is going to be appropriate to have loads of deep water in, and to do that, I'm first going to dig out a large space, just using the push tool and then getting it to flatten the surface. And then I will use the push tool to try and make a bit more of a slope, because it can be quite a steep incline from making little ditches like this. I do struggle a little bit, so it's just a bit of back and forth with this kind of thing to try and make a nice slope, because I want the animals to be able to walk in nice and easily. After I'm done with that, I'm just going to create a sort of raised ridge to the right hand side of the habitat, as I'm going to be having a wall placed there, and then I can actually move on to placing those walls. The walls are going to be made from a dark grey concrete, nothing too fancy, and to begin with I did think about using some really short barriers at the front of the habitat so that we could have a very panel-like approach to the viewing gallery. We could have some concrete panels in between the glass, but in the end I decided I would just have some concrete either end and have the entire viewing gallery be made of glass. It just makes for a better experience for our guests. Then it's just a matter of running the concrete barrier around the rest of the habitat. Doesn't really matter if it sticks out of the ground too much or whatever. We're not paying too much attention to that because we are going to completely cover it up later. You could use a null barrier, but I just end up using this concrete thing anyway. And when you're happy with the placement of the concrete barriers or whatever barrier you're choosing to use, I just used some glass barrier at the front to create our viewing gallery, linking up the two little areas of concrete that we left behind. You can see the pane of glass doesn't quite stretch far enough. Unfortunately, it maxes out at 20 meters and it appears to be 21 meters wide. So to fix that, instead of creating a 1 meter pane of glass, I just fill that with an extra piece of concrete. No problem. And with all the barriers in place, it's time to test out how the water's going to fit into this habitat. I really want this front end to be quite deep in terms of water so that we get a decent use of the viewing gallery, and from above it looks quite immersive as well. And as you can see, the water just does not come up far enough on that glass. The viewing gallery is quite shallow, and that is because the walls aren't quite high enough at the corners of the habitat. So I'm just going to play about a little bit, raising certain parts of the barrier and stuff. And to begin with, I was a bit hesitant about it. It just looked really ugly. However, I quickly remembered that I'm just going to be masking this all anyway with various rocks and stuff. So it really does not matter how this looks. I want it to function better than it looks. So I'm really going to try not to worry about that. And then I will come back when it's a lot higher, hopefully, and get a bunch more water in here. With the water at a more appropriate height, we're going to start using some rocks to mask all the walls that we've put in place. And to do that, I'm just going to apply a couple filters. I know that this animal can adapt to the biomes of both aquatic and temperate, so I'm going to be using rocks from those two biomes. And I'm going to start with the really big rocks, just to kind of cover as much area as I can to begin with. You want to make sure that random rotation is on and just cover various patches of the wall with these different rocks. Start big, get smaller, cover a larger area to begin with, and then start to do more detail work as you go. It really doesn't have that much thought to it, this process. I literally am just whacking boulders wherever. Around the door though, I do hold back a little bit, as I'm going to use slightly smaller and flatter rocks to create a door frame as such. I want to be a bit more precise around there. Other than that, it is pretty random. And remember, as I said in my previous video, when you're trying to make rock formations look natural, you want to have smaller rocks near the bottom, because they will, the bigger rocks will chip and they'll knock against each other and stuff, and these smaller bits of debris will naturally fall to the bottom. So that's how you get quite a nice natural look when you're making rock formations. Concentrate your smaller rocks and boulders near the ground, near the bottoms of these rock piles. Over on a flat portion of ground outside of the habitat, I decided to make a template that I could then copy and paste around the habitat wall. And the idea for this was to have this be quite a dam looking area, as if the beavers had created this themselves. Obviously they're not creating the rocks, but basically what we're going to do is use large rocks to begin with to make a large kind of section of wall, sort of detail it with some smaller rocks, and then we're going to rely on dead trees, broken branches and stuff, laying them down at various angles up against the rockwork to make it look as if though the trees have been cut down by the beavers, gnawing away at the trunks and stuff, getting really busy with their massive gnashers, and yeah, make it really look as though the beavers are responsible for their habitat and how it looks. And with that in mind, when it comes to placing trees later, we're really not going to place any trees actually, because if they were in the habitat, there's every chance that a beaver would just gnaw through it and make it fall down, which obviously is not very useful in your zoo. You want the habitats to stay how they are, and you don't want the animals to be damaging them. So avoiding trees is a smart way of doing it, I think, for the beaver habitat. But yeah, this wall piece was really fun to do. It's really quick and easy as well, just various boulders, various branches and tree trunks and stuff, and then you can select all of this using the multi-select tool and then copy and paste it to a few different parts of your habitat. Once all the rock placement in this habitat was done, it was time to move on to the enrichment items, as I always like to place those before any large plants and stuff, because we want to make sure that these are accessible and easy for the animals to get to. So I'm going to be placing an underwater feeder right by the glass of the viewing gallery, so that it will hopefully prompt some of the animals to come right up close to the viewing gallery. In terms of the rest of the enrichment items, I really don't have many at this point, because these are brand new to the zoo, have not researched them at all. So things like the beaver pool, do not have that, gonna have to place it later. So I'm really keeping it limited to what items I'm actually placing. and instead I'm just going to start concentrating on the terrain distribution needs. And these guys actually like quite a bit of short grass, which I wasn't expecting. I thought that they would just want loads of soil because, you know, they're destroying all plant life and stuff. But I guess that's not entirely true, is it? Because they live in wetlands and stuff. They create these kind of environments that are rich in nutrients for plant life to grow in. So of course they're going to want grass. But yeah, so once I got all of that terrain distribution done, it's time to move on to the plants. The first thing that I did in terms of placing plants was even more broken tree pieces, branches and tree trunks and stuff from different species that I didn't realise were allowed due to their environmental needs, their biome and continent needs and stuff. I didn't have all the filters applied earlier, so there are actually more branches available. So I'm just going to use some of these smaller ones and, you know, plop them about on top of rocks and stuff. Just really make it look like these guys have been destroying some foliage and really mucking the place up, making it their home, getting ready to build a nice dam. In terms of what plants we actually use in this habitat, I do focus a little bit more than usual on the underwater plants. In my previous habitats that have had seafaring animals, I don't know why I said seafaring, they're not bloody pirates, water-based animals, so they're not jellyfish either. Semi-aquatic, that is the words. Those are the phrases I should be using. Right, when I've focused on semi-aquatic animals in the past, I haven't really focused on the plants under the water that much. But here I'm going to use quite a lot of underwater grass and really make it look like it is quite alive. I'm also going to be using lots of reeds and lily pads and stuff on the surface to really make it look like this water has quite a lot of nutrients to it and is supplying these plants with a lot of juices for their living needs. I am really struggling to talk and I keep rambling. I also do just focus most of my plants that are on land around the edges of the habitat because moisture and seeds and stuff are going to rest in the crevices under the rocks and whatnot. So there's going to be a greater concentration of plant life in those areas. So that's why I keep plants mainly to the sides of the habitat. And even though earlier I said about not really using any trees in this habitat because the beavers would just eat them, I do actually end up using 2 bald cypress, and these are massive. And I do come out of a way to protect them, which we will see after the plants. But for now, I'll just shut up because I clearly need to, and I will let you just watch this in peace. A little trick that I decided to use for this habitat to make it seem a bit bigger, a bit more expansive than it actually is to go to the rear of the habitat and raise the ground a little bit to a height where I could start to plant some trees that would poke over the top. As we can't have that many trees inside the habitat, we do want to suggest that this is a wooded area, so we are going to have them just on the border. So I'm raising up the ground and I'm going to plant a variety of trees that can go inside the habitat. In terms of the filters and stuff, they would be acceptable for the animals, but I'm going to plant them at the rear of the habitat just outside. It will create this illusion to the viewers that the habitat is a lot bigger than it actually is, and that it is home to a lot more trees and stuff than it actually is as well, whilst keeping those trees completely safe from our hungry little beavers. Over at the underwater viewing gallery at the front, I'm going to use some flat rocks and some more sausagey shaped rocks as well to kind of make this area look a bit like a cave. I'm going to cover the underside of the raised path with the flat rocks to create a cave roof, and then running along the top of the glass I'm just going to use some of those sausage-like shaped rocks. It's the best way I can describe them without just finding out what they're actually called. Yeah, this will help to make it seem as if though we are in a cave, which is a bit more immersive for the guests, and it keeps this area a bit tidier. Having all these open gaps it's okay, but it just doesn't look quite as nice as the closed off kind of look. I'm also going to place a couple education boards down here. I'm also going to put a cheeky sign of a wooden cutout of a beaver because I think it looks really cute. A couple donation bins, and maybe we'll put a bench down here as well or something for the guests to, chill out. Coming back to those massive bald cypress trees inside the habitat, the idea that I have for protecting them is to use a chain link fence at a really short or low height, whatever phrase you want to use, and then just do a little circle around the base of the tree trunk. This will ensure that the beavers can't get to it and therefore can't cut it down using their mighty gnashers, and that's going to protect the walls of the habitat and stuff, because otherwise if this tree fell down, it is massive, it would destroy everything that it landed on, which would not be great. And also it would be dangerous for the actual animals, and we don't want them getting hurt either. So I just use a chain link fence, make a circle around it and get it to a decent height, and it does exactly what I want it to. It kind of suggests that the beavers won't be able to get to this tree. Obviously, in terms of gameplay, they can't cut down the trees anyway, but I don't know, it's a bit of an extra detail, isn't it? And after a little while of playing about, I have now unlocked the beaver pool, and to put this in place I want it to be kind of close to the edge of the habitat because it's got a rocky and branchy twiggy, just adding E on the ends of the words to describe what's on this thing. But yeah, the back of the beaver pool would really nicely blend into the things that we've got at the perimeter of the habitat. So I just need to move some of the enrichment items about a little bit, move some plants and stuff, and just slot it in at the side and blend it in using some smaller plants and stuff. And I think it ends up looking alright. And with that final bit of enrichment in place, this habitat is done. Thank you so much for having watched this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving it a thumbs up, share it with one of your Planet Zoo friends, and maybe subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this appearing in your subscription feed. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.